email I sent to Dr. Perez. This is March 2010. So this is in the middle of my PhD. I was feeling pretty lost. So I had the benefit of actually having my PhD pretty much fully funded on several fellowships. So that was great. That I didn't have to worry about money. But that also meant that I could kind of wander off and get really lost. So I kind of really try to seek out my own collaborations during my PhD time. And for the most part, nobody ever responded to my cold emails. But Fernando is one of the first people to respond to my cold emails of pitching these ideas that seem really. I mean, nowadays we're in bids here. This stuff does not seem that weird. But back 10 years ago, especially in a computer science department, people are like, why are you doing stuff with scripting and Python and scientific computing? That's not really CS. That's just weird. So, but now the world has changed due in large part to many of the folks here at BID. So I think without exaggeration, without hyperbole, I feel like if he didn't respond to my initial cold email and meet with me, I don't think that I'd be here today actually giving this talk. I think it kind of set off a series of very fortuitous events, him introducing me to folks in the scientific Python community and kind of showing the possibilities of what was possible and kind of led me 10 years later almost to the work I'm presenting today. So today, the talk that I'm going to give is called Learning Programming at Scale. This is kind of the work that I've been building up over the past half a decade or so. This is a sculpture studio in Tokyo. This is 1910, so they're doing relief sculptures here. This is a very hands-on activity. You have the instructor walking around here. We have people here, there's modeling here and everything. This is more modern. This is clay sculpting, so we have a model in the middle. We have people around here. We have the instructors kind of walking around. People can kind of pair up and work with each other and such. This is woodworking. This is at a hobbyist makerspace. So you see people kind of pairing up in impromptu groups, kind of working very hands-on. This is pottery. This is literally hands-on. I mean, this is like the most hands-on thing you can do. This is really interesting. This is at the Colorado Center for the Blind. So these are all visually impaired people learning pottery, which is really interesting. So, what all of these crafts have in common is this, authentic, hands-on, real-time nature. Like, this is what you really think of when you think of the crafts and the arts. And I feel that at its core, I feel that programming is this way as well. So the thesis I've really been trying to push is that programming is really a craft, right? And the studio here is our computer lab. So this is back when I was in college, my senior year of college at MIT. We had these Athena clusters. We had these computer labs everywhere with these really outdated Sun computers and old CRTs. But people would just congregate in these labs, work on group projects together. We have various classes, instructional staff walking around. Nowadays, these labs are mostly laptops, right? They're mostly open spaces like this where people are bringing their laptops and pairing up with each other and working with each other. This is even earlier. This is the 611 lab. So this was the scheme class that Berkeley had for many years as well, and now John kind of transformed it into a Python version of SICP. But this is where the lab was, right? This is where really much of the learning happened, right? As much as we like to think that our lectures are great, a lot of the learning is actually happening right now in lab, hands-on. This is the other side of the room where they newly had LCDs in 2002. So this is the sort of thing we want to get to in learning programming, just like in these crafts, very hands-on, authentic, real time. But the problem is that most people who are trying to learn, the majority of people around the world don't have access to these kinds of great in-person environments. Right, so if you think about all the people around the world who are trying to learn to code now, especially, things have become seemingly so accessible, and so coding is such a popular thing. Thinking about what does it mean to do learning programming at scale, right? So one thrust of a lot of my research is doing empirical studies of how do people around the world learn programming without the benefits of this in-person help. And I can put the slides up later, but you can just go to my website. All of these papers are open access on my website. You can kind of look at all of them for the details. So I did a series of studies with collaborators about thinking about learning outside the classroom. So I want to share some brief highlights. So I did a paper last year for Kai for about older adults learning the code, so people who are 60 and over. So this is an example. This is a woman who's 62 years old. She currently works as a document assistant in a law firm, and she said, I wanted to learn programming so as to establish a new career and have some independence. But the most frustrating aspect of learning online is that I do not have a teacher on a face-to-face basis, such as in a classroom environment, and this has impeded me greatly. So you know, you could learn all this stuff on. I mean, the great thing about programming is that all this stuff is available for the most part, right? With the resurgence of open source, documentation, everything, you could just read all the API docs that you want, right? I mean, all the information is there. We're not starving for a lack of actual data information. You know, it turns out this is another study I did. This is just this year about non-native English speakers, about people who are come from different language backgrounds and their challenges in learning the code. So, you know, this is hard enough for you who are native English speakers, but imagine if you know, think about how much resources are primarily English, and if you're coming from different language backgrounds, you have a lot more challenges. So, you know, typical quotes from this study involve, you know, the technical vocabulary learned to program and can be complicated to assimilate, especially if you don't know the equivalent word in your native language from a native French speaker. Then if you're Googling around and trying to look for things on web development, data science and stuff, you know, the first websites you land on, they, you know, may not be the most up to date, right? So you have these sites with Pringles ads and like whatever air filters ads everywhere and pop-ups and stuff, and a lot of these have not been updated for like 10 years. And it's just very hard to forward for information, right? So if you're a learner by yourself, you don't have someone helping you, it's just very hard. So we did this study, again, for CHI this year about modern learning resources and their shortcomings for people who are trying to learn independently. Typical quotes here include, you know, there's so much garbage on the internet that if you search something that does not look like an incredible website, then I want to verify it with a human being. So there's a lot of this desire for having human contact, right? And then, you know, there's these MOOCs, online learning platforms, all these things have become very popular for scaling learning and programming. And you know, the part where humans interact are on discussion forums. So we did a study a few years ago about MOOC discussion forums and the challenges people face in forums. And basically the TLDR is that novices have a really hard time formulating clear questions about coding concepts, especially if you're just writing into a text form. So you see a lot of these questions that are just dumps of code, right, without any indentation. They're just, you know, they're desperate, they're just copying and pasting something in there, and you're clearly not going to get very good engagement this way. On the flip side, we have places like Stack Overflow. So this is a paper we did with some colleagues at North Carolina State about barriers, especially for women programmers trying to get into programming and using sites such as Stack Overflow. And you can imagine the summary here. I like this quote, which is, have you seen some of the responses on there? You could dig out many of these. You know, this is a good example of, don't mean to sound snarky, but, you know, I won't let you read the entire thing, but there are many of these you can dig up, right? So you can imagine from the answering side, it's hard to get an impedance match with beginners. But, you know, I think this is what a lot of people have accepted as the status quo for learning online yourself, right? You have these docs you have to look through, web pages you have to go through. You know, you might be able to ask for help in forums, but it just feels like this really dehumanizing experience, right? That, like, you know, is this really the consequence of scaling? And I feel in my work that, you know, I want to try to push back against this and say that, you know, how can we actually scale these authentic, hands-on, real-time learning interactions so that learning online could be less like this in the status quo and more like that, right? So I want to bring it to that. And the talk today, I'm going to talk about 3 specific kind of interactions that I've developed based on this Python tutor system that Fernando has introduced. So the 3 big ideas here are discussing visual representations, connecting learners online, and then making experts multitask. So we'll start with visual representations. So let's get back to the computer lab here. So the lab is really where all the action is, right? So, you know, the first thing to really see in these lab settings, which I think is fascinating, is that, you know, code is really opaque, right? So actually the name code, if you've been programming for a while, you might not actually think about it, but the name code to non-programmers, it is cryptic, right? Code is cryptic and it's opaque. So people often draw diagrams, right? So if I gave you this piece of code and I said, what's going on here, you're probably going to start drawing some diagrams. You know, people have paper, whiteboards. You're probably going to start drawing stuff to figure out what's going on to build mental models. And in fact, you don't really know what diagram to draw here because I haven't even told you what language it was, right? So depending on the language, your diagram will be different. So the Python tutor system I've been developing over the past about 8 years or so is a way to automatically generate these diagrams. So it turns out that it works for a bunch of languages, Java, JavaScript, C++, Ruby. Python is the most popular one, and it's the original language. So we're writing this snippet of code here. And you hit visualize. It'll run the code, generate a trace, and render it as a visualization of the sort that you would see on the board. So you can step forwards, you can step backwards, and really explore what's going on, and then you can edit your code and restart again. So design as a system is it's supposed to be just meant to be super lightweight, right? It's basically taking these web-based execution environments and putting this visualization on top of it. And there's nothing to install, there's no accounts, there's really nothing. You can just go to the site and start playing with it. I think that low barrier to entry really just helps in a lot of settings, right? So in a traditional school setting even, you might be behind a firewall, you might have people install stuff. But it's just so much more accessible. You can step forward and backward. And the sorts of diagrams that the rendering engine generates is comparable to what people are doing by stepping through code execution, say on a board on paper. So we're really targeting the kind of design point of these pedagogical sorts of programs. And of course, we want to be able to work on a lot of language features, but the scale is basically what you can fit on the board. This is actually from an old Berkeley lecture. So this has been out for about 8 years now. I didn't have data from the first 2 or 3 years, but this is the total pieces of code executed so far. It's up to around over 50 million. Python is most of it, unsurprisingly, because that's the system started. And then this green line here is adding all the other languages. This is actually quite, it's actually a few million, but it's just dwarfed by the huge amount of Python. So of the other languages, JavaScript is actually really, really popular now. If you add the embeddings, this is where you can embed the visualizations in other sites as iframes. So if you add those, you're going to get a few more million. And this is all just 100% naturalistic growth, right? There's no advertising involved. I don't have an ad budget. I don't have any budget actually. So this is everyone's coming to the site from various places that they find on the internet, from courses, from searching, everything. So it shows up pretty well on Google. This is the total number of users estimated by unique IP addresses and local storage cookies we keep. Again, we don't have the data. I don't have the data from the first 2 years. It's around 3.5 million. It's a pretty decent estimate. And the thing that really excites me more than just numbers on a graph is just how diverse it is in terms of worldwide usage. So here's a heat map by log scale by country. The general idea that it covers pretty much everything. Central Africa is most notably absent. That's something that I think is really important for a lot of education and tech folks to work on. Mostly North America. India is another one. Western Europe. So it's kind of roughly mirrors kind of technological state in a lot of places. Most people are adults, right? They're adult learners. They're not in college. They're not in K-12. And 1/6 are over 55 years. So this is what the motivation for the older adult study was. So we have people from all ages. Most of them are non-native English speakers. Again, that's motivation for that study as well because of such an international population. So, the really exciting thing to me about the scale, research-wise, is that it really allows me to develop and test these new systems for bringing in-lab interactions to the world. So, like, this base system itself, it's serving its function well. A lot of people are using it and such. But, having this user base and having this broad base allows me not only to do these sorts of empirical studies about how people are learning, but also to be building new systems. And that's what I want to spend the most of the time on today. So the first interaction I want to talk about is how students are often working in pairs or small groups. So this is pretty clear from any of the pictures you see in lab. You see people pairing up or kind of lurking around in groups. So can we bring this interaction outside the lab? So this is something I deployed 4 years ago now. So this is a multi-user mode on Python Tutor. So if you're on the site and you want to share your session, you click this button. It generates a unique URL. You send it to somebody. So this may be your friend somewhere else. And then now you're in a synchronized session. So there's a chat like you would expect on the bottom right. And then you can also visualize the code together, step through the code together. And it's like you see each other's cursors. So if you're pointing on the left, the other person sees you pointing. And then you can, you can write code together as well. You can step through it together, and then you can just write code and re-execute. So this is really trying to mimic this experience of remote pair programming, scaffolded with the visualizations involved. So you can imagine going to a REPL or a Google Doc or something and doing this, but you don't have the benefit of having the actual visualization. I think that's crucial. So again, to summarize, you put a URL, you send it to someone, so you actually have to know somebody to send it to. So if you're in a class, you put it on a forum, you may ask the TA for help to join your session and such, or you just IM it to a friend. And then they join in. So again, it's just a simple URL to join, no installation. You don't have to worry about permissions or screen sharing, whatever. It's just in that browser window, really lightweight. The cursors are really important because that kind of emulates you kind of pointing to stuff and showing people things in addition to chatting. And really the design point here is how do we get these sorts of pair or small group interactions? How do we bring that online? Some questions that we had from the deployment were, can this remote pair programming and real-time chat emulate the in-lab interactions? Do people actually chat about the visualizations? Like, is that actually a useful thing, or are they just, just chatting? And can people actually learn and feel some kind of human connection by using it? So I deployed this about 4 years ago. This starts mid-2014, so May 2014. And this is the total number of what I call substantive sessions. So this is sessions where at least 2 people both sent at least 10 messages, or they both made at least 10 code edits. There were some sessions that actually had a lot of code edits, but no chats, and it was because if you look at the data, it's because they actually use the code to communicate. Like they could just write a comment and say, oh, well, look at this line here, and they're actually, it's like the code is like a Google Doc. So there's no explicit chats, but they're chatting through the editor itself. The sessions, the substance sessions are comparable in length to in-person sessions. So this is a distribution of the time spent chatting. So this is, from the first chat to, the last one before someone leaves. Of these sessions that were, at least 2 times 10 chats, right? At least 20 chats. And, this 37-minute, yes, go for it. That's a great question. Yeah, the question was, do people use Skype or Hangouts and stuff? And that's right. So there are some sessions. So there are false type A, B. Can't get the errors right, but there are some things I'm missing because there are some sessions where like, oh, this chat kind of not great. Let's go on Google Hangouts, and that I obviously can't get the data because I'm not the NSA. So yeah, so some people do call out to a video chat if they want that because this is just text. That's a great question though, but we can only analyze the text ones. And in fact, some people, after they're done, they're like, oh, we should just go on Hangouts or on Skype or something with a richer interaction. That's a good question, though. So qualitatively, we just analyzed the chat logs, and people interacted like you would kind of expect in person. So there's roughly a half and half split between the one-on-one tutoring case, where someone was clearly tutoring someone, and the peer-to-peer case, where people were trying to figure stuff out together. So the one-on-one tutor case, this is an example of a good tutor. So our program crashed. Why do you think it crashed? And then what structure? What about this? What about this? What about this? So it's very Socratic, and the learner kind of starts responding and stuff. So these are examples of good tutoring interactions where they're nudging the learner along. The peer-to-peer case is more like 2 peers. So they're trying to figure out something together. Oh, I guess base string is checking. You can step forward. Is it this? Let me see. So they're trying to experiment with it and kind of figuring out stuff together. So it's sort of like the friends case where they're kind of going back and forth. People learn by discussing these visualizations. So this is the median numbers. Again, this is 76 chats for the substance sessions. And there are about 60 or so visualization interactions. So that's dragging the visualization, going to different spots, looking at different spots. So they were kind of interleaving these chats and visualizations. If you look at the logs and you kind of code for what kind of knowledge we think we're inferred that they're trying to transfer, you see both this kind of declarative knowledge, like, oh, I don't know what this construct means. Can you tell me what this means? And procedural knowledge. Let's step through and try to debug this problem. Yes? Yeah, that's a great question. The question is about what were they actually coding, right? Was this a algorithms problem? Was this an open-ended make a Pac-Man game thing? I think that most of them were things that they're trying to figure out in class or labs. Either a problem, or they were trying to just understand a concept, right? Like we saw something in a lecture, I want to paste it in from the lecture notes and see what does this list really do, kind of things. Yeah, but this by itself it doesn't actually have problems with it, right? So there's not content platform. Yeah, so there's no content platform here. People come in and it's like a paste bin. Like they do whatever they want on the system. There are related questions here before we move on? I saw some other. Yep. Do they go with any documents? That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if, you could save the state of your code and you can go back to it later. you can actually just send the code in a URL. But mostly it's kind of a one-shot thing. Good question. We can also talk afterwards about the system details too. And the thing with the chats is a lot of this stuff referred to visualization. So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. Here's a typical one is something saying like reference is deleted, object stays because another reference still in place. The new reference using same name be put in place. So like these are the kinds of chats that are referencing the visualization. Like this is really, I think, the power of having the visualizations there, because if you don't, then it's hard to talk about this stuff, right? But the visualizations really give you a platform to talk about these things. And beyond just talking about the technical content, people engage in a lot of things that might seem quote unquote off task, but I think these things really fostered motivation, right? So things like friendly banter, camaraderie, words of encouragement. So here's an example, oh my God, terrible, I'm sorry, and then Tutor said, not a problem, you have written little code, it'll take a while to get comfortable. So people are really using this platform in very kind of humanistic ways. And of course, all of this is, is our interpretation of my students and I coding this data, right? We're not actually talking to them and seeing what they're doing, right? Because we don't know who these people are. These are all anonymous. But just from our inference of chat log analysis, this sort of stuff seems to be happening. So the summary from this first of three sections is that visual representations empower discussion, right? So having a substrate here for you to actually discuss something, seems really simple, but if you don't have this visual substrate, there's nothing really to talk about. I mean, you're just talking about the tokens in code. So, what I really hope y'all get from this section is that, it's just to think about how opaque code is to beginners, right? I mean, it basically looks like this, right? This is view source on the YouTube website. And it basically looks like this, and it's like, what is there to talk about with this, right? I mean, if you don't surface something to talk about, it's just very hard to make heads or tails of it. So by doing these visualizations, we want to try to turn code into something visible, right? And I think that the runtime state and what's going on is this representation that people can, no one really complains when they're doing visual art about not being able to see it, because they're really, really seeing it and feeling it. So the related thing, the next thing is that now that you can discuss visual representations, the next logical thing you want to do is to be connecting learners online with each other. Going back to the chat log analysis, there's a bunch of sessions that I saw in the logs that had one user, but some chats, right? So it's like, why would someone go on and start chatting into the ether? So they go something like this, right? Someone help me, is anyone here? Server's broken, nobody's here, right? So there's a lot of things along this line. Despite me putting very clear instructions, there's on top of the page it says, you must send this URL to someone, right? You must send this URL, but people will just start typing the void, maybe hoping somebody would come. So that naturally lends itself to a system design idea because the need found us right here. So let's go back to the computer lab. So in a computer lab setting, how this works is that the students put themselves on a help queue. Right? So there's a blackboard in the back where students just write down, oh, I need help with this, or here's my computer number. You can actually see all the computers are numbered. All the stations are numbered. So it's like, oh, please come to me when you get to me. And then the TAs kind of walk around and help. And maybe the other students could come volunteer too if they're done with their assignment. So how can we scale up this experience, right, this kind of help queue experience? And it turns out that the Python Tutor site has, the traffic has been growing in the last few years. These are daily active users, so this is a smooth curve. So this is total daily active users, so it's around, the 6,000s now. These are first time that day, which is cool too. So we're having half the people are first time visitor that day. So, I felt like starting, I always had this dream of having people help each other. But, in the early days, there weren't that many people on the site, so I didn't really think that this would be possible. But really starting a year or so ago, I thought that this, was getting within striking range. So there's anywhere from 50 to 100 people on the site at any given moment. So this is fairly true day round. This is about half a year of data. These are box plots. So this is central time. So it dips down the lowest, in the middle of the night in the US and the highest midday US, and this is pretty active, I think nighttime in Europe as well, but it is fairly international, right, from the map. So you're going to have people around all hours of the day. So if there's people around, then we could try to ask them for help. So this is the public help queue feature. So now what we can do is we can write code here, and then there's a get public help button on the upper left. And now if you do that, you're on the queue here. So this is the queue, just a list of people. This is me, this is my hometown, California. Now anybody who visits the site, they don't have to know your URL now, right? This is just someone who's on the site from anywhere in the world. They now see a public queue, and then they see this is me right here. They click to join, and when they click to join now, now we're in the same session as we were before, right? And you can, as the creator of this, you can close the door, you can kick people out, you can moderate. You basically, the creator can moderate. So this is closed, which means I want to get myself off the queues. I don't want anyone else jumping in. And then you can do this exact same thing. So I won't repeat the video, but it's basically the exact same thing. So once again, there's a public help button. So we go from just having a private chat button, which was 4 years ago, to a live help button. The private chat's still there. So if you notice these things here, everyone has a pseudonym kind of user ID that's a pseudonym. So you can imagine coming back and finding that person, but we don't allow people to have accounts or any kinds of custom things. There's geolocation, and then the language version they're using, and then whether there's people in the room already, right? So if there's people in the room, maybe you don't want to jump in because you're like, oh, this person's already being helped. Let's jump into somebody else. And then if you're idle for too long, for a few minutes, you get grayed out and pushed down to the bottom. Yep. Yeah, why did I decide to put location? That's a good thing we could actually A/B test of no location located. I felt like, you know, one, it's not too privacy revealing, and two, it gives it a bit more of a human touch. And in fact, actually, some of the we did a survey and we just looked at some of the logs. Like some of the people actually jumped in because they recognized someone from their country or their state and stuff. So I think it has a minor positive effect, but yeah, I think it's just it's something there, and it's you know, I did not want to let people do free text basically because you don't want. I mean, the idea is that most people on the site are not caring about the queue, so they'll just kind of shut it off or move it. This is optional. Right? You don't have, most people on the site are not using this. You can just shut it off. But like, you just don't want, you know, obscene messages up here or something. But you know, geolocation I felt was innocuous enough. Yep. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll get into the numbers in a bit, but I would love to do more fine grain on homophily, right, on geographic homophily. So you know, you're on the queue, and then you put yourself on, and you can help other people on the queue if you want also. And then someone joins in, right? So the big questions here is exactly what you're saying. You know, who volunteers to help? You know, why are people doing this? It seems pretty random. It seems like there's actually no incentive to do this. And can they actually provide somewhat useful help? And how does it compare to help from people they actually from people they know? So we have this nice control group because we actually have thousands of chat sessions in the exact same system of people that know each other, right? So this is something we can compare against when we do more detailed chat log analysis later. So we have these thousands of sessions from 4 years ago, and this public help feature was launched about 6 months ago in November, and already the usage has surpassed this one because it's public, right? So that, you know, that this rate is limited by you have to know somebody. So you know, being public, the rate can go way up, and these again are these substantive sessions. These are, you know, a substantial amount of chats. It's not just someone coming in and like just saying hi and leaving. I mean, these are total strangers. Right? I mean, as far as I know, these are total strangers. They're just, they don't even know who each other is. Right? So this is, you know, we already have 5,000 sessions. The really cool thing here is that this, you know, really did connect people from around the world. So this is a spaghetti graph. These are IP addresses. These are only renderings of sessions that cross country boundaries. So, you know, there's a bunch of sessions that are local, probably in the same time zone, you can imagine, right? People are in the same time zone, same country. These are cross-country boundaries, you know, over 100 countries, thousands of sessions. Most of these are in English, right? You need to have some English literacy. But I'm pretty sure there are sessions that are in other languages as well. But Spanish is a very common one. Yep.
Did you filter out people see these like the big queue of people who want help? Do you filter based on location anyway before you go?
Yeah, that's a great question about filtering. I don't have the graphic, but there are usually not that many people on the queue. So it's usually, you know, 5 people or so. But yeah, that's a great, like, if this is so popular, there's 100 people in the queue, then you should probably prioritize by something. But yeah, right now it's just we show everybody. But usually the queue doesn't fill up that much. Yep. There are no topics. There is no context. That's right. Or other languages. Yeah, you see the other language as well. Yeah, so C++ or Java. That's right. So this thing is, you know, it's not like it's in a course with context, right? So, you know, you can imagine if you're a MOOC provider, you integrate this into your course, and then you have a special chat room for your course, and then everyone has the context, and maybe you have the problem. But yeah, this is completely, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, my motivation for making this is I wanted to see if it actually would work at all. Right? Because like, why would people jump in with absolutely no context, and could they actually do something with it? Yeah, so you're jumping into just something completely random. It turns out people actually come really quickly. Median was 2.5 minutes, which is faster than if you were asked for help on a forum, right? Like way faster than, unless you have TAs that are really, really vigilant. Yes? Yes, yeah. So this is if someone is coming to help. Yeah, so not everyone is going to get help in 2.5 minutes, right? So they're going to, I mean, yeah, if you're not going to get help, yeah. So this is assuming you get help, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Of the substantive sessions, yeah. That's right. That's right. And these people completely volunteer. So, most will join within 5 minutes, right? So if you're on for a long time, you might nobody there. But the cool thing is that if you look at the curves here, the cumulative curves, if you're willing to wait, you'll usually get help. I mean, the idea here, this is the percentage. So down here, the 16% is everybody. So if you just take everybody in the pool, only 1/6 of them get helped. That's because a lot of people drop out early. So a lot of people just don't wait around, because they just, they leave after a minute because, like, oh, no one's here, they leave for a minute. So it turns out if you're, let's just say 40 minutes or whatever, if you're willing to wait a while, chances are someone will come just because you're just there and, like, people come and go. And again, the queue is not huge, right? So, like, people will usually come. But the thing is, if you never go idle, it's basically guaranteed someone will come. Because if you never go idle, I just said 10 minutes as a generous cutoff. But if you're not going idle, that means that you're actually, it's first come, first serve, right? So if you're not idle, then you're pretty much the top one. Like, if you go idle, you get pushed down. If you're not idle and so the instructions I tell people on the site is, there's no guarantee someone will come. You should press the help button. But you should just keep doing what you're doing, right? Just keep doing what you're doing and see what happens. Usually there's one person actively chatting. This is the one person besides the person who asked for help. Sometimes there's some more people chatting. I mean, the outliers are interesting to see. I actually want to look at what's going on there. But yeah, usually it's one person. But the cool thing is that there's always a few lurkers, which I think is interesting. And so lurkers are people who are in the session, but they're not chatting. And the creator of the session can kick anyone out they want. They can see all the users and kick them out. But a lot of them, they just let them stay because, I mean, as long as they're not being, like, disruptive or something. And I think that's interesting because maybe they're actually just watching along and just, kind of, they're just curious. They're like, oh, what's going on here? Right? It's kind of like you're in this kind of lab setting. And that's interesting as well. So here are some high-level descriptive stats here. So it turns out 4% of these substantive sessions had helpers who were themselves on the queue. So this is like, I am asking for help. I'm on the queue, and I see some other people on the queue. And I'm like, oh, might as well just jump in and see what they're up to, right? Or maybe they can help me. Maybe we can work together. There's also there's a feature I made recently. I haven't broken out data, which actually nudged people to kind of encourage people to look at the queue. Like if you're waiting for a while, it's like, look, there's other people on the queue also. So 27% of these sessions had helpers who themselves asked for help in the past, and 14% were actually in. Where they were the requesters in real help sessions in the past. So this is kind of, some indicator that, you got help and the service seems to work for you. So you're going to back in the future, maybe let's just kind of pay it forward and see what's going on. This is the reverse. This is 17%. Their first interaction with this feature was them helping someone, being in a chat session, and then they asked for help in the future after that. So I thought that was interesting as well. And finally, the 11% were lurkers in these sessions, but they're helping for the first time. So this is kind of this peripheral participation thing. So they were actually just checking out the session, seeing what's going on. Is this an interesting environment? And then they actually, did their first time actually being active. And this is all just naturalistic behavior, right? So this is all just stuff that's just emergent. There was no cues, and back to this question of context, they didn't know what they were really jumping into. There's no incentive. There's really nothing here beyond just people's curiosity and just kind of natural inclination to do this. So this naturally gets the question, why do people volunteer? So I put this in situ survey. When you're volunteering for help, you can fill out this little one-liner if you want. That's optional. So big reasons were to take a break from working. So like this is like the typical, students procrastinating case, or you're in the lab, you're stuck on your problem. Let's see what other people are up to. Paying it forward is another one, right? This was the helped and then got helped and then helping case. And then there are also just instructors or TAs or actually even professional developers who are just volunteering for fun. They're like, this is kind of a fun thing to do. It's kind of like how people you know, back when Stack Overflow started, when people were on Stack Overflow for fun and not because they wanted to like, you know, have a badge or get a job or whatever. Like back in the day when people were just not racing to like criticize each other, right? When it was actually a community where people were doing it for fun. We do see this here. And then there are repeat helpers as well, right? There are people who actually just go back quite often. Another thing with chat log, so the chat log analysis is nowhere near done. This is something I'm hoping to submit in the next few months. But just very preliminary look at this is how do these chats compare to the chats from the prior section where people knew each other? So there's two groups using the same interface. So there's more tutoring, less peer-to-peer, because it's pretty clear that someone is on this because they actually want to be tutored. They don't know what's going on instead of trying to figure stuff out together. So it turns out that this is, again, very high level, but the failures come pretty fast, right? So there are a lot of cases where it's not all fun and games. I mean, a lot of times someone jumps in, like, I don't know what's going on, right? It's like, oh, you know, someone jumps in your session, you're like, oh, I need help with this thing. It's like, I don't know what's going on. Or they just jump in, they leave because they don't know what's going on. So, but those are all filtered out, right? So if you basically get to around 2 times 10 chats from each person, like once you get to that point, you're somewhat engaged, right? Like you're somewhat invested. And if you leave, you're going to leave early. And there's actually been very little bad behavior I've observed. I mean, I keep a fairly close eye on the chat logs because one big concern with, you know, an open system like this is the, you know, potential for bad behavior. And that would, you know, one, it's bad, and two, it's bad for the, you know, it's bad for the reputation of the site, period, right? Because you don't want people to be like, oh, this is a bad place. So it turns out that, you know, I was monitoring it pretty closely, but there was actually very, very little bad behavior. And anecdotally, I think it's because there's really no incentives for it, right? This is all private. These chats are all completely private. They're anonymous. They're stateless. Like, you're not spamming any forum or, you know, there's nothing, you know, whatever you do, no one actually sees it except for the people in your session. And one really simple mechanism just basically solves most of it is a kick, ban, undo. So if you're the person who requested help, you see everybody in your session. You can kick anyone out you want. If you kick them out, they can't see you. They have to go through some contortions, you know, change their IP address, change their browser, clear their whole history and whatever to see. They can't see you, and then you can just undo their changes. If someone like defaces your code, you can just kick them out and undo it in one step. Yep, question. Do I filter for bots? I don't do anything with bots currently. If there are a lot of bots on the site, they're very impressive. Yeah, that has not been an issue. But you know, the spamming thing could be an issue if the site gets more popular and the bots come on. You know, the regular site itself, they're probably automated crawlers looking for text boxes to put stuff into. So that has some. But the chat ones, they haven't gotten that sophisticated yet. I don't see any. I haven't seen any spam. I have not. Yeah, I have not seen any personally. But you know, there's a big disclaimer on this is that this is like a public forum. Just it's like you're posting to a forum, right? Like don't post your personal information and so forth. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. Currently, I don't think I'm going to, just because one, just engineering-wise, there's a lot more stuff to do, and then two, I think just from a, my interest from a research angle is that I want to try to see how you can do without that, right? That I think online communities with reputations and profile management is a reasonably understood thing, and I want to see how much you can push on this direction. Other questions before I move on? Last sec. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we have all the code and we can analyze. I mean, I haven't really done much in that direction, but I would say it's like on the order of, like a 20-line thing, right? It's on the order of, again, what you fit on the board, like a programming interview problem style on the board. It's not, here's 20,000 lines of code I need to debug. This is not for production, right? This is more for pedagogy.
Sorry, even within 20 lines,
that's right. I think that it varies a lot, but I think that if you want to take the mode, I think it's like a CS1 sort of thing, introductory computer science. Yeah, so I would say it's it's mostly introductory type content. Yep.
Do you have to discuss how often you get covered as a session?
Yeah, I do have that, and it's very little. There's not so. I should look at this more carefully, but there's very little kicking. And sometimes I think the kicking is inadvertent. I think they think that it's like, we're done with the session now, so everyone gets kicked out because we're done, like they don't know how to close the button. But there's not too much, and then there's also just not too much of this. But again, I should do a much more rigorous analysis of this. Okay, I'm going to move on because we have about 10 more minutes, and then we can chat afterwards as well. So the conclusion of this section is that the shared context, I think, really facilitates anonymous help, right? So like having a place where people are going to do a certain thing. You know that these are people who are, for the most part, trying to solve problems and learn and such. And it's like the wood shop or the makerspace setting that you're there because you're doing this thing. And if you don't know each other, it's okay because you can still help each other because you're there for that reason. You're not just some random joker who's coming in. Right? So the last section is, I'm going to do this about 5 to 6 minutes or so, is about multitasking. So the final thing here is the fact that, let's go back to the lab here. So lab instructors also monitor this queue, right? So this queue can be for other students to help out, but you might want experts to help as well. So the fact of the matter is that there are far fewer instructors and learners in any setting, right? So we want to figure out how to scale up a single expert, right? So how much can we scale up the efforts of one person? So one poor instructor is walking around and running around the lab helping 20 people or stuff. So how can we help him or her do that? So this is an extension of the Python tutor. It's called the Codopticon, which is a one-to-many real-time interface. So this is, there's a tutor conceptually in the middle, and then they're monitoring all these learners in their class or in their MOOC writing code, and they can kind of jump in and help whoever. So the simple way to illustrate this is with one tutor and one learner first. So this video will play twice. The first time, look on the left side, and the second time, look on the right side. So the first time, this is a learner writing code. It's a product function, XY, and then they change it to AB as the parameters. And then this is how you multiply, right? Capital X. And then this doesn't work. And then they change it to lowercase x, and hope that works also. And clearly these syntax errors are nonsensical. So the right side, we're going to look at the right side, which is what the tutor sees now. The exact same video. The tutor sees the edits come in chunks. And this is nice because you just see them, conceptually and with diff. So the red flashing means they're erasing XY. They're adding AB. So if you're the tutor, you would see this tile that summarizes the learner activity. So AXB, and then, print. And they try to run, and you see they have an error. And then they change the code again. And then what the expert can do now is they can go back. This is a history slider. So this is history. So this is all the diffs that they're making. So this is why we do the chunks. So they can kind of see what's going on. Oh, they did this x, and they did a lowercase x. OK, so then they can open a chat box, and they can chat with the learner. So this is the other way. Beyond them requesting help, you can kind of push notifications to them, and then, what's going on here. And then you can, they can work there. So every tutor sees, for every learner, you see this tile, which summarizes their activity and their history, and there's a little chat box down here and their errors. And to scale this up to multiple learners, we just tile these tiles. So this is 10 of them. So if you have a big monitor, you can fit probably 15. So this is just, everybody's just kind of going and doing their thing. It's all updating in real time. This is like you have this dashboard, and you see where everyone in your class or your section is doing. You can monitor everything in real time. The history is really important because you can't see everybody doing in real time because you're going to miss something. So if you see someone has an error, you just use the history to drag back and see what's going on. And then the crucial thing here is you can open multiple chat boxes, right? This allows you to multiplex and to monitor multiple people and try to figure out what's going on with everybody. And if there are more than 10 learners, then there's a prioritization system that the main insight is that not everyone is active at once. So it's not like everyone is furiously writing code at once. People are paused, people are stuck, people are on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. So this thing would slowly shift to prioritize the most, it's like a cache. The most recently active or thrashing people are up here. Everyone else is kind of pushed down low, and it kind of resets once in a while. Yes, in the back. Oh yeah, so do we record all of these, and can you just replay this for later? This is not currently done, but that's a great idea of using this as a way of showing what you've helped in the past. Yeah, I mean, it's technically doable, I just have not done that yet. So the big questions here are, how many learners can a single tutor handle using the system? And then can they actually help learners? And then how does this code often compare to real life tutoring? So I'm going to briefly summarize the user study. So we did this user study. We had 8 TAs and 7 TAs, 1 instructor for an intro Python class. And they actually went on the site, and we told people on the site, look, there's going to be a helper online. It turns out single tutor can monitor around 100 people on the site. I mean, not everybody is active at once, right? But out of the 100, you might have a dozen or so who are active at once, and they can chat with about 3 people at once. That's probably the most they can really multiplex. This is really good for simple nudges, right? So these kind of small chats are like, I'm getting a syntax error. It's like, oh, why don't you check this part? Or like, it's probably not on this line. Or like, here's a link to a documentation that you need. So these are very kind of simple nudges that they're doing. And you're trading off real depth for quantity, right? Like, in order to get to a lot of people in a class, you can't spend a lot of time with someone, period. So we're trying to trade off this quantity and quality. And the tutors felt really energized by this. And it could be because a lot of times in lab, it's either idle, right? They're either sitting idle, or they're walking around and there's too many people who need help at once. So this is a way that they can kind of manage their pace better. And pretty much everyone kept going after the user study was done, because like, oh, let's just, they wanted to keep doing this after the 30 minutes were up. So the conclusion here is that this real-time scaffolding helps experts multitask, right? So like with some kind of scaffolding that's just well-designed and kind of summarizes the state, you can kind of help experts really kind of multiply their efforts, right? So this person right here, like, how are you actually going to be able to see everybody at once, right? It's very hard in a physical setting, but in a digital setting, we can build these tools to help experts as well. So in sum, the 3 big themes here were visual representations and power discussion, right? So about this Python tutor system and this chat system and how that's scaled. The second one is shared context facilitates anonymous help, that people who are strangers can actually come and help each other because they have this nice context and we have these lightweight moderation tools. And I think this is far more intimate and personal experience than posting questions on forums. And then the real-time scaffolding helps scale the expert part. And going back to this, I think that the hope is that these sorts of tools really try to fight against this, perhaps natural consequences scaling. Right? We want the instruction online to be less, kind of like walls of text and more like these sorts of human, authentic interactions. And I think that we really need to think about how to scale these authentic human-to-human interactions because, I think we understand how to scale content really well, but scaling human-to-human interactions, I think, is a lot more challenging. I think there's a lot more work left to do with this. So this project, you can see the GitHub repo. It's all online. I mean, there's many, many, many people to acknowledge. I mean, several of the people in this room were very instrumental in getting this off the ground. So John was one of the early power users off the ground, and Fernando and plenty of people who have given a lot of feedback and critiques along the way. So my one soapbox slide. This not really a soapbox, this is a moving box. So I started this project back in grad school when I had no furniture. This is my grad school living days, almost 10 years ago. And I'm just really happy this project has grown the way that it has in this really organic way. And this, for the most part, this is a single developer open source project, right? And it's serving millions of people. I think in terms of, we had, in terms of numbers, there are very few projects with n equals 1 maintainers with this amount of usage. I'm actually having coffee with Nadia Egbal later today, who has great reports and talks about this challenge of single developer open source. And I have my traditional research grants are funding my grad students. I have a fairly full lab, anywhere between 4 to 6 grad students at once. And the traditional amounts of money are really for funding traditional research. And I think that going forward, looking out beyond the next decade, I think we really, I think people here totally understand this, right? We need more flexible sources of funding to sustain and scale these sorts of open science and open education projects in the coming decades. So if you all have ideas for how to, think about these kinds of issues, I'm really happy to talk about that. And with that, it is 4 o'clock, and I am happy to take questions, or if folks have to leave, I'm happy to hang around afterwards as well. So thank you very much.